Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh, everybody. This is me, your host, Preacher Moss, and you are, of course, here on the set of the ShOUT show. Peace blessings to a lot of people that have reached out. There's been a couple things I've been involved with. We had a virtual rally to free Imam Jamil Al-Amin, who's been incarcerated for over 20 years. And that was a very successful rally. A lot of people reached out in regards to the situation with Brother George Floyd, just asking information, getting opinions, if you will, having discussions, and it's been a very full and robust discussions. But I have been looking at the television, or let me rephrase it. I've been trying not to look at the television because a lot of the protests and things do one or two things. The other way, either get you very, very irritated, or it can get you very desensitized to what's going on. I really have fought to find a middle ground. And that middle ground is interesting because that's not the perspective that people are dealing with. We're dealing with ideologies that are opposites in a lot of regards. In reaction to the president, I really see this overall scope to militarize the police and as a way to scare the people. And there's a danger to that. And I'm going to talk about what happens when you militarize police, number one. Number two, there is a lot of pain and anguish coming from communities like Third Ward in Houston, like Chicago and DC. And I think there's a nuance that I feel that we're missing that has to be discussed in a very meaning and cogent conversation, because certain things are going to get away from us and we'll be revisiting them again. I said on a post earlier, someone on Instagram, somebody was talking about Black Lives Matter, and I had to refrain myself, but then I had to just be honest. And my point was, listen, don't go out buying t-shirts or yelling slogans about Black Lives Matter when you don't love Black people. You can't have both of those situations. You can't yell Black Lives Matter, Black people. You can't, for lack of a better word, I'm going to embrace the culture. I'm going to take the music, the jazz, the clothes, the language, and you don't love the people. That's theft. That's forgery. If you really, really want to understand what I'm talking about, look at Congress. You know, the title of today's topic is Who Protects Us from You? Who Protects Us from You? And I took it from a song that was released years ago from the group Boogie Down Productions with KRS-One. And the question, it is a compelling question. He talks about law enforcement. If you look up the album cover, if you had album covers back then, if you look up the album cover, it is him sitting down, looking like he's explaining to himself to a police officer that's standing over him. Why is this boy? Because KRS-One is a legitimate 6'6". Who's going to really stand over him? So the picture in and of itself is very, very symbolic. But he asked the question, he says, you were sent here to protect us, but who protects us from you? And I thought about that in a very large, if you will. Who protects us? And that's. I'm going to say something, and I really want people to focus on that, particularly African Americans, because we get deluded by messages of hope from people, messages of conciliation from people, folks telling us you're right. I mean, you have police kneeling down in protest now. Years ago, not too long ago, Colin Kaepernick lost his job from kneeling. It tells you how the cycle goes. But who protects us from you is that question. And what KRS-One was saying and what I'm saying at this point in time, let me get a shout out to Sister Kathina. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's something that is not being discussed. When the question from KRS-One, the second part of the question was, who protects us from you? He was talking about the police. You were sent here to protect us. Who protects us from you? It really goes into the scope that it's African American life and African American existence. We have never felt safe. We've never enjoyed the quarter of feeling safe. I thought about this from the time I was a child. My grandmother and my mother and my father, they ingrained in me that you may be free, but you're not safe. And I lived that because I watched them live lives, productive lives, but in the end of it, they weren't safe. My grandmother, make sure you're home by so and so. When I would go down south, don't go over that section of town. Why not? It's not that I wasn't free to go over. My grandmother and my aunts and my uncles said, you're not safe. Sorry, my camera's freezing a little bit. But it was a deep thought that you're not safe. So for all of the people that have been listed as murdered by police, there are laws in place that institutionalize the fact that you are not safe and you will never ever be safe. I'm a practicing Muslim. I am a practicing Muslim. I love my Muslim community. I will die for my Muslim community. But I won't lie for my Muslim community because the fact of the matter is, if the police were to run through my house right now, they can see all the nice plaques with Arabic, but I'm going to die a black man on their report. I'm going to be arrested as a black man on their report. And when they talk to the DA about what to charge me with, the thing that will never come up was, did he look like he felt safe? We live with a paranoia now in our own communities. The Muslim community is now beginning to see some aspects of it because it's coming out in aspects that, we have a mental health issue, a mental health crisis in the Muslim community because the anxiety is so high with things like Islamophobia and things like that perpetuate. But I think about this, it is the blueprint for how we oppress everybody else or how we put a cloud cover over folks to make sure that they don't feel safe. So even when you walk down the street, I'm looking over my shoulder because something could happen. That is an authentic Black existence. An authentic Black existence. And while it may seem small in some regards, it's very detailed. It's very detailed. I'd look back at all the times I would be out with my friends when we hear a siren. And we would look at each other like, first of all, we would be together all day. And the question is like, did you do something? Did you do something? Were you with somebody who did something? And it was this crazy self-evaluation. And what it did was break down our self-confidence in terms of our own character, in terms of who we are, our ability to express ourselves. God forbid, it framed a negative understanding of our own agency. We were afraid to talk to people. When the police would come in the neighborhood, they lived on the fact that I know you're not safe and I can make you even more uncomfortable with that feeling. So as you watch these protests, the impetus is not to reject the protesters, control the protesters. The impetus is to make sure that they don't feel safe. And when they go back to their neighborhoods, they tell the people in their neighborhoods, I don't feel safe. From a political standpoint, I've said this oftentimes, and I may get some flack for it. I believe in numbers. When I look at politicians that have been serving their country for 40 years, I do the math. And I'm like, you were in the 50s, 55. Let me look at your voting record. And that's how I find that you were a person who's basically a segregationist. I'm like, what was the tip point that all of a sudden You see the light. You're a person who signed laws to make sure people who didn't feel safe. And now all of a sudden, I'm supposed to believe that you're having these liberal thoughts as you look at me as a black man or a black woman or a Native American or a Latino or someone who's poor. And I'm supposed to believe in my heart that you got it right? I don't. Thank you, Sister Kathina. But it's not to complicate the issue. One of the things about not feeling safe is it's a pathway to not feeling empowered, to not feeling that you could trust your own intelligence. I see a lot of things coming on, and this, I'm going to be really honest. There's a danger to a lot of sympathy. I'm very sympathetic to the George Floyd family. But I don't want it to be a scenario where it's situational. There are plenty of people who have been infected who didn't get the press, who didn't get noticed. There were no videotapes. I've mentioned the story of Terrence Johnson back in the 70s in Prince George's County, Maryland, how he was done and how he was institutionalized to the point where he literally assisted his own suicide. He killed himself because the system had broken him down. We have to be wary. When I say wary, I mean you have to be leery of people who show up when you're in grief. Why show up when I'm in grief? Because I don't trust it as much as I used to. I don't want, in a crisis, I don't necessarily want people who are in grief. I want people who are in critical thought. I want people who are telling me the strategy of how we get around this. Emotional is only going to take you away. I said this about the protesters, and forgive me, Allah forgive me, but I'm going to tell you so. And, these are some of the weirdest protests I've seen in my life, brothers and sisters. We can't tell who's the protesters and who is inciting things. When I used to protest at Marquette University, we wanted divestment from South Africa, from these companies, including my school. You know what, man? We used to have to steal equipment. Charlie Hall would make sure that we could get the equipment. God bless Charlie Hall, that we can have our rallies because we didn't have equipment. I'm looking at these rallies. People are, first of all, passing out bottled water. I'm like, are you a revolutionary? Or are you trying to make sure you're not dehydrated while you, oh my gosh, are you going to the protest? I don't know. I got to be to work at 6. The lack of commitment tells me something's wrong. Things are on fire and people stop to take selfies. I'm not lying. People are stopping to take selfies. This is an Instagram protest, brothers and sisters. Meanwhile, I was a part of a rally to free Ma'am Jamil Al-Amin. Why is that important? Why is he important? It's not that he's incarcerated. What's important is he is absent. Laws and situations have found that he is absent. He can't relate. He can't share strategy. All our other black leaders, the relevant ones, all due respect, they're dead. They've been murdered. My mentor, Mr. Dick Gregory, God bless him, so may Allah be pleased with him. He told me something that broke my heart. He said, preach. He said, I'm 80 years old. He was 80 years old at the time. He said, I've outlived all of my contemporaries. He said, and I worry I've outlived my purpose. He said, I look in kids' eyes, they don't understand my purpose. And I feel that way oftentimes, that I may have, in some regards, beyond Allah make me funny, maybe outlive my purpose. Because I see young Muslims come up to me and they go, oh, you're a comedian. I'm like, no, man, I'm a servant. I'm a servant. And then I watch young kids run around knowing that they're not safe, but even more so, they're not doing anything about it. And this is not a sad conversation, brothers. It's definitely not a sad conversation, but it's a necessary conversation. Because if I flip these things around, I realize in my lifetime, I have done things and I've said things that have made the enemy not feel safe. And only in that space am I actually effective. Because I find that the enemy is not safe, but you know what? The people I'm trying to help a lot of times don't feel safe with my own activity, the words coming out of my mouth, the things that I'm saying, not just in the press, forget the press, the things I'm saying on the street corner, the things I'm saying to young kids at the basketball court. I'm telling them about how you need to live your life, young man. Yeah, I'm telling them about how to be fathers. I'm telling them about how to be brothers, how to serve the community. And sometimes even that natural act that was done to me or done for me by my father, my uncles, my aunts, it's slipped upon as unsafe. And that is the mental illness, the spiritual mental illness. I'm being honest, Maha. You know, I'm just being honest. You know how I said. But my point is, sometimes, yeah, I feel like maybe that has to do with I'm not seeing the outcome, and that could be the selfish part of it. But as we begin to look forward, how do you twist it around? How do we take KRS's song, uh, "Who Protects Us from You," and say, "Who promotes us from you? Who aspires us from you? Who empowers us from you? Who opens pathways?" And I think when you start looking at that, I think it's a beautiful thing. You know, I talk about folks. I like to talk about folks who before Martin Luther King or before X and folks like that, the people who were foot soldiers, maybe they didn't get the shine or the notoriety. And to my, for me, Allah knows best. I don't question purpose. Sometimes I just say maybe I'm supposed to be doing something else, and that's natural. That's natural. But we all have work to do. Brother Reginald Kitchen, formerly Brother Reginald X, that's how far back he goes. He said something to me when I was a young Muslim, and it stuck with me. It really, really stuck with me. Um, and we talk about service. We still talk about it now. This is a very delicate. This is a very rich relationship I've had with this man for over 30 years. Like when somebody brings you into the deen, and you could pick up the phone and call him for 30 years. And let me underline that our conversations always made me feel safe. Okay. He said something about where we are today. And what he said was, and he pulled it from the Quran. I'm sorry I didn't find the exact verse. But I don't even think I need to find the exact ayat out of the Quran. I think it's just a universal thing, which makes it even more poignant, even more beautiful. He said, Allah never wastes the work of a worker. Well, no. I got the mistake. No, Allah never wastes the work of a righteous worker. Allah never wastes the work of a righteous worker. And there's two things in there: waste, righteous, and worker, which all circle around the universe of, again, purpose, circle around that space. But when you're working in your purpose, I find when I'm with groups of people who understand their purpose, you ultimately feel part of community. You ultimately feel like I'm a bit of I'm part of a family and things of that nature. And I think it's really important to underline, if you will, when you actually feel safe. Now, on Sunday, I talked about the wisdom of elders. I said, what happened to the grandmoms? What happened to the Sunday dinners? And, in retrospect, maybe I was leading into this conversation, but that's when I felt most safe. When I felt loved, when I felt fed, when I felt counseled, when I felt protected. I didn't leave that porch. And it's almost cathartic. Like when our loved ones, particularly elders, pass away, we don't feel that love in some regards. We feel that sadness, and I think part of it that wisdom goes away, and it doesn't come back in the world the way we think it would. It has to be in us. So as we begin to move forward, and I know there's going to be more protests and things like that because people are injured. And the propensity is, hey man, you put a bunch of people in the room. The facts don't lie. hurt people hurt people. You know, people that don't feel safe work to make other people feel unsafe. That's the way it is. You know that. There's that dude. If if a person walks in and they feel like, hey, you know what? The only way I can agitate this person is talk about them not having a blue shirt on. Then that's what I'm going to do. It's the weirdness of it sometimes. And Sister Maha, I'm gonna come back to your point about outliving your purpose. Sometimes you feel when you're in your purpose, when you look around, it may be a dearth or absence of people that are doing righteous work around you. And that is the miracle. And I call that's a miracle of Allah, because Allah will send you to a place where the work, the need or the necessity of the work is extreme. I liken it somewhat to teaching in inner city schools. Um, there's nothing to really prepare you for that, because you have students and you're going to teach, but nothing prepares you for the level or the crisis of need that you have with these kids, because sometimes it's so far beyond it's so far beyond just the books. I didn't realize I was a good teacher till I did my first home visit. A child was acting up in my classroom. You guys know I taught severely most disturbed kids, and a strategy that a woman said. I said, well, I can't remember her name. She was a reading resource teacher, but I was having a hard time. She said, "Well, the problem is," and I'm gonna say what she said. You do what white people tell you to do with black kids. She said, "That's why these kids are killing you. You doing what white people are telling you to do with black kids." And she said, if they act up in your home, in your classroom, you got to act up where they are. And that was my first home visit. And I went to a kid's house, and I remember the look of terror on his face, because I let him act up in class all that day. And then I came to his house, and I'm here to tell you, you talk about a kid not feeling safe in front of his mama. And I ain't gonna lie to you. I told everything. I said, ma'am, does he curse? Did you use the MF word in your house? She's like, no. I said, he used it in my classroom. It was funny to watch the kid to shrink from here to here, not feeling safe. However, when he came back and our relationship moved forward in classroom, and I told him why I did it, he moved from a point of anxiety and anger to realizing no teacher had ever come to his house before. No teacher had ever come to visit his parents before, or his mother in this case. I visited the mother. I called the father because they weren't together. But he said, why are you doing this? And I said, I want you to be successful. I said, I want you to be successful. I want you to be productive in class. I see something in you, and I see potential. That's what I see. And all that kid could do was see somebody that cared about him. And it wasn't just me. His mother had already done that. I could tell. But I'm saying from this perspective, the kid felt safe. And as we begin to wrap up, when we look around the world with the health pandemic, with these riots, in Islam we have Allah. Allah makes us feel safe. It's my little brother. What's up, Samir? Love you, man. This is my little brother. Yes, I'm feeling. Allah's God, keep it simple. Yes, sir. Thank you. But I'm gonna add on to that, JT. I'm gonna say Allah's God, keep it simple, but Allah keeps me safe. So, brothers and sisters, wherever you are in life, understand that other people in other situations may not feel safe. They may never tell you. And that's the purpose of communication and conversation. We have to step outside of ourselves. And sometimes stepping outside of ourselves makes us feel like it makes us feel uncomfortable. There's a difference between feeling uncomfortable and feeling unsafe. And I would encourage all of us to put that in our conversation. When we say, hey, how are you doing? They say, I'm good. I said, are you safe? Hey, how's your mom? She's good. She's safe. And I would ask all of us to reevaluate and find that particular vernacular and apply it to what we're seeing now. Because right now in the world, people don't feel safe. And then there's another group of people that want to make sure you never feel safe. I'm not saying this, but I'm going to say these few words and I'm going to go. We're all entitled to feel safe. We may have to work for it. We may have to fight for it. In some cases, you may have to die for it. People have already died for it. But never let it be a situation where you feel like somebody owes it to you. In the words of Reginald Kitchen, Allah never wastes the work of a righteous worker. Righteous and worker. You guys have been great. See you tomorrow, inshallah. Appreciate you. And I'm going to give a shout out to Sister Ree, Brother Hassan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yes, I'm blessed. Thank you, man. I hope to see y'all again. And you know what? When you see your children or your brothers or your sisters or whatever it is, give them a hug and whisper in their ear, I love you. I just want you to be safe. Take care, everybody.